Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to another live stream. Let's see here. I gotta update this on Twitch real fast, and then we'll get started. Update the title so we know what we're talking about tonight. Awesome. So we are talking about portfolios and doing a few portfolio reviews. We had Christina and Erin volunteer their portfolios for us, so thank you both so much for doing that. I can only do this if you guys volunteer, so I really appreciate you doing so. So we'll take a look at these, kind of give some UX feedback, what we can do to sort of improve the experience. And then from there, Christina provided her source code a little bit, and so I'm going to take a look at that. I was looking a little bit. It's in React. I'm not a React dev. I'm a Vue.js dev. Conceptually, they're very similar, but there are some differences. So I won't give really specific feedback, but maybe some high-level feedback that I would kind of consider. So that is what we're going to dive into. So let's take a look now at the overall user experience, get started there, and then we can keep on rolling. So this is Christina's site. So right off the bat, we've kind of got this. It doesn't scroll, so this is kind of the experience. And then we've got the navigation up here, and we've got some links. So we got portfolio, down there, resume, contact. We've got GitHub, LinkedIn, and then it looks like a dark mode toggle, which is pretty fun. I've seen a lot of folks doing this these days. They kind of have that dark light mode, which is pretty fun. It's kind of a good way to practice your JavaScript a little bit and show that off. So let's see here. Hi, I'm Christina Kopecky. I'm a full stack web developer, professional flutist. I think that's how you say that. And fluted? I think flutist. Flute teacher that lives in San Jose, California. Started studying full stack web development, UX, and computer science 2018 with the hope that I can change the focus of my career. And then we have my recent projects, and we've got the picture of Christina, which is really nice. I was like including a picture because I think that like really shows who you are. So I recommend doing that. So just looking at the overall kind of visual design, kind of taking this in a little bit, a couple of things are standing out to me. So I think the navigation could use a little bit of work. All these elements are really spaced out from each other. So I think, let's get this bug going here. If we kind of reorganize these elements a little bit more, so maybe we bring this one over somewhere like that, and we bring this one over a little bit more, and we bring this over here, and just kind of like space them out a little bit more, maybe a little bit more white space in between them as well, and kind of just bring them over. I think that will just kind of help them just appear a little bit more organized instead of just kind of a little bit jumbled up on the page. I would also consider maybe not having GitHub and LinkedIn in the navigation. Maybe bring that like down here. So that way the user kind of has another spot to look for you. And I don't think I can make this larger. And that way you can just clean up your nav even further. You can just kind of make it, that's not going to work. Just even like a little bit more focus as well. But those are just some minor suggestions on how to clean up the nav. The contrast here, so we've kind of got this like light gray going on, and then that's fading into this kind of cream color in the background there. Maybe going for like a full white background so the contrast is really there. It kind of blends a little too much, so that's just something that kind of strikes my eye. I like the handwriting here for the logo. It kind of adds that like nice personal touch, and it's also your website, so I think having your name or your initials up there in the upper left-hand corner is perfectly appropriate. I think that makes a lot of sense. With this dark button, I don't think we need, and we've kind of got this going on down here as well, we probably don't need this much padding on the sides of it. We can probably get away with having that be a smaller button. Very clear what the affordance is. I think that this is clickable. We're kind of repeating that pattern down here, but I think we can get away with a lot less padding. And the same thing with this button down here as well. So those are some things that I would kind of consider. Moving down to the rest of the information here. One thing that I might tweak is maybe get rid of these little carrots. They're kind of like code related, and they look, so I see kind of the rationale behind that, but what they're doing is they're disrupting and maybe this is just an alignment issue, but they're kind of disrupting the alignment here and the saccades of your eye. So I would just maybe even consider removing that, or maybe making sure that this is really left aligned with the content a little bit better. So it just is a little bit easier to scan and parse, because right now it's kind of interrupting my vertical flow, and it just kind of catches me off guard a little bit. Although it's a nice like nod to your code experience as well. This is looking pretty good, but otherwise I think the rest of your information here is pretty good. For this, I think this summary is really nice as well. I would probably focus a little bit more on, I think, so as a student, I think it's really hard, especially if you're still a student in school, because you're like studying and you want to be honest with people as well. And I think that's super important to kind of just be honest and open with. But at the same time, you're taking a lot of this action here, so I don't think you have to say you're hoping to change the focus of your career. You are changing the focus of your career. You're making that happen. And so maybe reworking the language to be a little bit more action-oriented and less aspirational will help you just come across as a little bit more direct. And so that's something I see sometimes in student work and student portfolios, so that's just something that I would consider. But I think everything else in here is really nice. My recent projects, I think that's a good call to action. I think with these kind of pages, you might want to just bring this into the landing page instead of making it a separate part of the experience. But I'll leave that information architecture kind of up to you, how you want to organize your website here. But I would clean this up and maybe make this background color a little bit more, have a little bit more contrast, have it be more of a primary color so it really grabs the user's attention, because that's the primary call to action on the page. Right now, this dark button is kind of grabbing my attention because it's a really dark primary color on top of a light background, versus here it's kind of the inverse of that. So this is actually grabbing more of my attention, even though that's smaller and kind of tucked away than this larger element down here. So maybe inverting the color scheme on this, making this one sort of that really solid color, and maybe doing more like of an outline button up here. Would just be a little bit more of a consistent approach within your visual hierarchy, so it's clear to the user what their call to action is. Regarding this kind of like box in the center here, so I think that's a fine approach. What I would consider doing is maybe making it more of a fill on top of your background image, so that way you don't necessarily, because we're doing this for contrast, right? But it feels like you're kind of like, you're trying to manage the image as opposed to helping the image support your overall information. So what I would do is like add like a fill on top of this image here, and that way, and then kind of maybe set that to the same color that you've selected here. So you still have that contrast, but it just looks more intentional within the design. And it's a little bit more subtle as opposed to it just being like this card that just immediately pops out as well. When we're working with imagery here, we really want the image to support the content as opposed to be like the primary focus. And so this is kind of walking that line between just taking too much of our attention away from what's really important on the page, and that's getting to know you a little bit better. So I really make that sort of the more of the primary focus. And then I think down here, maybe having some more call to actions, like maybe repeating like the contact and the resume buttons down here as well. You're going to want to have one primary action, so that should be the like what's really prominent within the design. But maybe another option or two, just because you don't have that scrolling functionality, just so the user just has more opportunities to find that information set, would be something I would consider as well. Let me give this a refresh so all of the links are working better. And let's go ahead and click this button here. Alrighty, so these are the different projects here. So these look like Lambda notes. And again, I think you can kind of get away with getting rid of this background or making it, especially on this one, because you do have like the card set up here, so you don't necessarily have to worry about creating that. I see what the consistency is coming in, but if you just kind of had your background set up so it was that overlay, that would work as well. And say we've got a fixed background here, all these projects. These look really nice. I like that you're kind of giving a little bit more of an explanation for what this is, which is pretty fun as well. So I think those are great. GitHub repo, deployed site. So deployed site is like a very like technical way to describe that. Like maybe visit site for maybe the HR hiring manager who might not know what deployed means. That can kind of make it just a little bit more actionable for the user as well. And then one of these should be like the primary action, and one of these should be the secondary action. Right now, these kind of feel a little bit like tags almost, like in a blog post or something like that. So maybe emphasizing one of these over the other. One of them can be an outline. Probably thinking about what like an HR person would want to look at versus like a team lead or someone on the technical side. The hiring manager probably just wants to look at the deployed side and be like, oh, this is cool. Or I shouldn't say the hiring manager, the HR person. Where the hiring manager or the person who you're going to be working with or for, they're probably more interested in looking at your code and your repo. And so this kind of is a question of who's your user, who you're trying to impress with your portfolio. So I would focus maybe on making the like visit the site the primary action, because I think the developer will want to see that too, right? That you can host this, and maybe de-emphasizing the GitHub repo relative to that. That's just my take. However you want to handle that, I think is fine as well. Looking at your text hierarchy here a little bit more, you probably don't need this much spacing like right in here. You can probably get away with a little bit less spacing. And then your text stack here. So this is like the third most important piece of information on the in this content here. So your text hierarchy, this is very clear that that's important. This I think is also clear, and that makes a lot of sense. So maybe I would bring this. Let me get VisBug out so we can look at this. Kind of play with this. So maybe if we bring this up a little bit more, and so that's kind of set up there. And then maybe if we can come into our dev tools. Let me see here. Bring this down, and let's see here if I can adjust the. All right, we've got a span in here, so let me say like, font size. Let's see, that's too little. Maybe like 0.5, not that little. 7.5, right? Just kind of de-emphasizing that even further. You're really establishing a much stronger text hierarchy than this that we have over here. So. And again, you can kind of adjust the sizing as well. So you can kind of bring that a little tighter up close to here. Probably not too tight, but however you want to consider it. And then you've got more room for your actions down here. So I think you could refine that a little bit more. But I like the cards up here, the images up here. They seem a little big. They seem like they're getting stretched out a little bit. So maybe consider making these a little bit smaller so you have a little bit better pixel density. You're not stretching them as much. That would be one thing to note as well. Cool. And what happens if we hit contact? Cool. This is a simple contact form. Couple of things here. So I like that you're using labels. That's always great. Always recommend using labels instead of placeholders. Generally speaking, we don't tell the user the required status in the placeholder. We might do that either in the label or as an additional information item. So that's something to consider as well. And then this is super redundant placeholder text. So either leave off placeholder text entirely. Sometimes it can confuse the user. They feel like they've already filled out the form, even though the placeholder it's just placeholder text. The other thing that I like to do is use sample data. So name would be Jimmy example, and then the email would be jimmy@example.com, and then the message would be hi Christina ellipsis or something like that. That could be, I think, more effective than just repeating the label within the form. And then required, I don't think you need to necessarily. So there's two schools of thought on this. You either use the asterisks to show that something is required, or you only mark optional forms fields, and everything that's required you kind of just leave. I'm kind of in that camp. I think just marking the optional ones works, and it's worked pretty well in some usability studies. But I think some people like to really see what's required and what's not required. So marking the required fields is the other way to go. Whichever way you pick, I would just be consistent and just make sure that you're kind of following that as best you can. I noticed that, I actually noticed this on the other page. Your button styling is very different than it was on the front page. And so now I'm kind of is this a tag or is this a button? Here it looks more like a button. But on the project page, it was not consistent with how they were being presented in other parts of the interface. So I kind of had to relearn how buttons work. So if you're going to have that full border radius and no border, consider making that just consistent throughout your buttons and your affordances. But otherwise, I think that looks pretty good. And once again, the same kind of background issues that we talked about are relevant as well. Download the resume. Nice. We got the resume right here. One thing, if you're going to take a user to a different page or an external link, and that kind of it's not, but it kind of feels that way. One thing that I like to do is have, let's look at Font Awesome, that its external link icon. So let's kind of look here so we know the one I'm talking about. Yeah, so this kind of icon to just let the user know that this is taking them somewhere that they might not be expecting. I think that's super helpful. So kind of maybe having that right after the download resume. And you're not really downloading it, you're kind of viewing it. So again, I would expect this to maybe initialize the download over here, and so that would just pop up for me. But so maybe view resume would be more appropriate, and that having that little external link icon would be useful there as well. So those are sort of my major pieces of feedback. But overall, I think you've got all the content here. This is a really great start. It's just about polishing it, taking that next level, and just kind of going from there. So overall, nice job. Looks really awesome. And so we were going to take a look at the code a little bit, which is awesome. So this is built using React. So when we're designing our portfolios and actually like coding them out, there's two like kind of schools of thought. There's like one kind of being like, I'm going to use the technology that I want to use, and that's, I think, perfectly okay because it's your portfolio and you can do whatever you want with it. And it's also like nice maybe in interviews where you can be like, I built this with React and let me show you how well I organize this project. And they're like, oh, we want to hire you for React, so this makes sense. So that's a really great way to do it. It's something that the kind of the school of thought that I adhere to as well. Oh, thank you for the follow. I really appreciate it. The other like school of thought is like, this is a static website. It should be built using static website tools. We don't necessarily need all these other things. And that's a fair point as well. Like, do you need React for a content site with limited interactions? Probably not. Although you do have the dark mode button. Like, I can understand that being more of a JavaScripty kind of thing. We could probably execute that with jQuery or something like that. We really wanted to add that functionality. So again, it's a kind of a trade-off there. I don't know if one is better than the other. I kind of say do what you feel comfortable with, but there is something to be said for resisting that urge to over-engineer and going with something that's maybe like Gatsby or just plain HTML and CSS. I think you can do a lot with that, and you'd be surprised. And it'll cost you less. You can just, you could throw this on Netlify or something like that. It's not going to cost an arm and a leg either, but it would be even cheaper and faster to load for your users as well. Again, these are just like little nitpicky things, and there's really two philosophies and schools of thought. So I'm going to let you guys make up your minds there. Cool. Let's dive into the source here a little bit. So we got some app.js, kind of where I would think to start. And like I said earlier, I'm not a React dev. I'm a developer. I know JavaScript. I use Vue.js as my primary front-end framework. Conceptually, I kind of know what's going on here, but I'm not going to like jump in and be like, this is how to do this in React, because that's not my skill set. Let's see what's going on here. Looks like we've got some console logs left in. So whenever you're kind of pushing code and deploying code, and we can look here, and you're, I don't know if I was looking before. Yeah, there's a lot going on here. We try to clean that up as best we can. Sometimes in your bundle, in your build process, you can actually like disable console logging if you're like bundling for public. It just looks like a little unprofessional, especially if a developer is kind of looking at this. So just make sure that all of your console logs are removed from your code. And I say removed as opposed to commented out, because it just, if like somebody is like source diving and actually looking at your GitHub repository and they see like an uncommented console log, it just looks a little untidy. So at least that's just my perspective. So make sure that you are removing these while you're going through the code here. Yeah, we've got a couple console logs in here, and that's fine. Like I get it when you're developing, but maybe try and take that out as best as possible after you're done. So this all looks pretty good to me. Again, I'm not a React guru, so if somebody's like, there are some React errors here, that's on you. You can do your live stream and hit those next. I'm just looking for what strikes me. Cool. So we're just rendering this. Nice. Scroll to the top. That's always kind of fun. Service worker. That's interesting. Offline capabilities. That's pretty cool. It feels overkill for something like this, where it's just a simple content site, but and there's probably not a lot of JavaScript happening. But this is pretty interesting. So it's cool. Like if you walk into an interview and you're like, I added this to my blog because I wanted to, or my portfolio because I wanted to experiment and learn a technology. That I think is an awesome conversation starter. So for instance, my personal blog, I have like a whole backend system. And for whenever I go into a job interview and they're like, oh, we like your portfolio, or they want to talk about that, I'm like, and have you seen the backend? Let me walk you through this. I built this all myself. And it's just like further validation that I'm the best candidate for them. So again, playing with technologies and experimenting on your portfolio site when you kind of do have that greenfield, I think is a great practice to get into, as long as your portfolio is still accessible. Let's see, we've got some less going on. These are all nice. This I could probably comment on a little bit better. Got everything kind of broken out into different files here, which I think is great. Variables.less. You got your mixins or your variables here. I didn't see a mixins, but there we go. Hover theme, cool. That looks pretty good to me. That's actually a pretty smart way to go about doing that. You got a reset. Oh, I clicked on the wrong one. Reset. This is just generic. This is a good one. I feel like that's a lot of people's resets. Index.less. Yeah, that's all these guys here. Interesting. I think sometimes I do this inline where I'll just be like variables, or because these are like so, I would say like well named, you might not need that comment, but again, that's just a personal opinion. Comments are so personal. I think you can kind of do it however you want to do it. I didn't see a blog. Let's look at this contact form though. Nice. Yeah, that looks all pretty good. Looks like we're using rems instead of m's and all that good stuff, so I'm not going to dive too deep into that. Let's go into components here, see if there's anything going on. 404, that's kind of fun. Resume.js, blog.js. Let's go into portfolio, see what's going on here. So we got portfolio.js, sorting hat. Okay, so that's within your services. That's where you're getting that data. Local storage, a theme, cool. Again, the console logs in here. Got a few console logs, so I just clean those up. And then we're just kind of returning this information, mapping over the portfolio cards, passing in that data. That all looks good to me. Let's see here, portfolio card. I need to get Dustin in on this because he would have some probably better feedback than me. Let's see here, component did mount, render. Again with the console log. These kind of comments I think are really nice sometimes because it's like, what is this again? And you're like, oh, it's this. So I think nice job there. Kind of putting all that through. No refer. Good thinking on your SEO, all that good stuff. Nice. Yeah, so I obviously didn't look at all of this, but I think for the things that I saw, the takeaways were your organization looks good. I think this all kind of makes sense to me. I think there is something to be said for maybe this is not a huge website, so maybe having all of your components in one file or in one full directory and instead of like nested is probably okay. But there's something to be said for some organization. So however you want to do it, I think that's fine. It's also your portfolio. Design it the way develop it the way you want to do it. Everything else looked good. Services, I didn't look in there, but project info. So this is probably all the data. Yeah. This, I think, is a nice way to handle this if you don't want to deal with a database or something like that. This is kind of how I always do it. I try to use data as much as possible so like I can do like a little JSON file for myself and just have it locally as opposed to be like hard coding and repeating so I can still use maps. And if I ever refactor to an API or something, I have that there for myself. It's like the front end's already structured that way. So I totally am a big fan of that approach as well. So great job, Christina. This all looks super, super good. Again, just a few slight things to do to take it to the next level. But I think you are more than capable to make that happen. So great job. And I look forward to seeing the improvements. Alrighty, so now we've got Erin's site. And this is still a work in progress that I've been told, but she was generous enough to let us take like a little sneak peek here and maybe offer some advice for how to improve it while it's still under construction, so to speak. So thank you for sharing again. So right off the bat, so this is scrollable. There's more information here. I wouldn't know it was scrollable until I started to do it. So maybe making this not the whole viewport size and maybe having a little bit of that bottom content come up would be helpful as well. So there's more information sent as well. Right now, you've kind of just got your name, which I think is important. So good for having that. Software developer, that I think is important to say as well. But I have no other context about who you are or what you're trying to do or like what you're looking for. So definitely focus in on this like unique value proposition. Basically, whenever I'm coming to a portfolio, the first thing that I want to know is who are you? What do you do? What are you looking for? And maybe something interesting about yourself. Those are kind of the top couple of things that I want to know. Like what makes you unique? And what about your perspective is something that I should be interested in. So I feel like every student kind of coming out says, I'm a software engineer. And that's great. I think you need to say that because you're in this world, right? But what about you makes you special like to be a software engineer. So I think Christina did a good job. She brought in her like music history. So I'm a flutist and a music teacher and a software engineer. All of a sudden, I'm like, oh, that's an interesting combination. Like, I want to learn a little bit more about you. So the more that you bring your personal experience into this and what distinguishes you and differentiates you relative to all the other software engineers out there, I think it's going to go a long way to helping you stand out. Great. So what else is going on here? We've kind of got a little radial gradient happening in the background. Which I think looks pretty good. There's a little, these kind of get lost because it's like really dark icons on top of like a really dark background. So maybe like flipping the color palette here, or even considering like moving this information maybe beneath software developer, kind of having a little bit more of like a V shape almost, or not, a V shape, leading the user's eyes down towards that would also work as well. So consider maybe reorganizing this a little bit more. This is where I look first for like navigational elements or like context on the site, and the first thing I'm seeing is like LinkedIn, email, GitHub. Maybe putting your initials up here would be more effective, and then maybe fixing them like you have these would also be something to consider as well. And then just kind of looking at this information, there's no clear call to action. Like, I don't know what to do next apart from maybe try clicking on these, but these don't have any hover effects or something like that. I'm just relying on the cursor. So that's kind of my next thing. I'm like, what do I do next? And then I'm like, oh, I scroll. So maybe having like a call to action here that's like my projects, my portfolio, probably something like my past work, my experience, something like that to just kind of direct me to the next piece of information. So I know to take that action. But those are just the little things there. Let's talk about skills here. So we dive right into the skills. Nice. And this is an interesting approach. I think a lot of people just kind of list out like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, but this is kind of nice. You're providing a little bit more context, which I think is nice as well. So the product manager, mentored students, languages and frameworks here. So I really like this part. It's just because it's like, these are the things that I feel like I'm good at. Oh, is that clickable? So that's a little bug. So this looks like it's clickable all the way down to over like here. Notice where my like mouse cursor changes. So you're gonna have to adjust the width on that, so that way they don't accidentally click somewhere else for those elements over there. So that's one little bug. But I definitely like all these skills here. Maybe for this like languages and frameworks, making that like a little bit like visually distinct from this skills, like this kind of section up here. So maybe like doing more of like a tag approach down here, just to add some like visual interest. Right now this feels a little bit like a PowerPoint, and maybe kind of moving away from that a little bit would help make it a little bit more visually interesting. Another good way to like do that is to play with like, instead of using like just the default unordered list kind of style, or unordered list styling, using like custom icons or like little checkboxes, even like, these are my skills, I've got them, hire me kind of thing. You're subtly reinforcing that message. That could be something interesting to play with, and it makes it look just more visually distinct as well. So that would be something as well. Nice white space here. You probably get away with a little less, but that is also more of a preference than anything else. Projects, your hackathon. Okay, so here we've got lots of project. Okay, that's kind of the whole site, which I think is great. If I don't know what this symbol is trying to represent. Maybe that's like the group project aspect. I don't know. I know that's React, but does everybody know that's React? I think this is Redux, but see, like, I'm trying to guess here. So as a, like, if I was an HR person, like, yeah, I might be familiar with these, but I'm probably not like, man, I know everything that's going on here. And even developers, I think sometimes like don't know all of the possible logos and symbols. So maybe writing these out, maybe if you do like a tag approach up here and just kind of repeat that same styling, that would also be pretty effective. So you're adding consistency to your design as well. And then the text hierarchy in here, I think could use a little bit of work as well. So maybe making this a little bit larger so that it really stands out, like this is what we worked on. I think the dates are nice as well. And then having like the link to them as well, it's also super important. I would say like visit project instead of like, I'm not quite sure what's going on here. Oh, let's see here. Oh, so this is the name of the project. See, I was like, because of the text hierarchy here, I was kind of thrown off by this. So I would say this is the name of the project, and then you could describe maybe like in this section, you would say like what you did on that project, give a little bit more background. Like, what is Lambda Notes? What is this app all about? What role did I have? So I was like, oh, I was the front and back end. Oh, I had this adventure game. Like, just giving that context, but below the title, because that's how that's typically done. It's more externally consistent. And then having this button to like visit project, I think that starts working in your favor a little bit better. And then beneath that, having the skills that you use, I think that works as well. Or even having the skills and then the button or the link to go visit that project as well. Again, a lot of white space in between them. So I think you've got a good amount of white space like right in here. Like, that looks pretty good to me. But a lot of white space here. So maybe reducing that to be more like this would also work as well. This kind of gradient effect is pretty nice as well. Kind of adding some contrast here. Probably could get, like, it's a cool visual element. I'm not sure, and it like ties back into what you were going for up here. So I get what you're going for. So I'd say that's up to you if you want to keep working with it or not. But I think it looks pretty good. This projects, I would make this even a little bit larger. Really let the user know what they are looking at. And so that way they just kind of have a little bit better context and understanding. And then finally, I'm looking, I know this is a work in progress, so the things that I'm looking for would be some way to get in contact with you. I know you have this, but maybe like a little like summary down here. Like, now that I've learned more about you, just give me like one more chance to reach out to you, because that's the whole point of the portfolio, to get those reach outs. And then also focusing a little bit more on like maybe an about section, so I can learn more about who you are, what you're bringing to the table, why I would want to hire you, or at least talk to you through an interview, I think would also be effective as well. So those are the things that I would look for in this as well. Let's see. Oh, we didn't look at Christina's responsiveness. Let's look at this here. This looks pretty good. Yeah, for the most part. And I actually like this design better than how it looks up here. Like, I think you can get away with having those up top or just in a line. And that just looks a little bit more put together than having them all stacked on the side as well. So maybe you do keep the logos and you just reorder this and keep it consistent like this. That could be a consideration as well. But overall, I think your color palette is consistent, at least. It's not the most upbeat or exciting color palette, but that's okay. I think it's the color palette that you want to use. That's just kind of more of a subjective feedback on my part. And when you're designing these things, you kind of want to think like, yes, I want to show my personality, but what do I want my users to feel? And color is a big part of how you convey emotion within design. So how do you want your users to feel after they leave your site? Probably a little more upbeat, excited. So again, considering your color palette is very, very important as well. I like the fav icon. I think that's a Rebel Alliance. So that's pretty fun as well. A little bit of personality. Maybe incorporate some more of that personality throughout this. This is pretty like business focused and oriented, which I think they can be, but again, that's kind of something you could incorporate. Big Star Wars fan. I hope that's Star Wars. I'm pretty sure it's the Rebel Alliance icon, but I could be. I think that's in Font Awesome. That kind of looks like where you might have grabbed that from. Maybe. I'm just taking a guess here. So let me see if I am. Yeah. So that's like the Rebel Alliance. So, still know my Star Wars. So the internet doesn't come and get me now. Awesome. But I think overall, really nice job. Really great work in progress. You've got the foundation here. You've got the information that you want to be showing, and now it's just taking that to the next level, really polishing up and focusing in on it a little bit more. So great job, and I'm excited to see where this ends up. So thank you, Erin, and thank you, Christina, as well, for sharing your portfolios with us. As always, I'm very happy to give feedback to anybody who wants it. Starting to expand now to other projects, so if you have like a project down here that you want to keep working on and you want some feedback on, I'm happy to look at that with you. Give some feedback, probably on the UX. I won't jump into the code so much. I'll let you handle that, but I'm always happy to talk about the UX as well. So again, thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. And we will see you. I'll be on next Saturday doing some more, or this Saturday, I should say, Saturday morning, doing some more streaming of my own portfolio rebuild. So I'm into the code now, which is kind of exciting and fun, of my own portfolio. So that's kind of an ongoing project. And then next Wednesday, again, I will be back doing some more portfolio feedback. So thank you so much for joining me once again, and have a wonderful rest of your evening.